welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page. This is Jessica, and I am really excited to welcome back Sherry Thomas, author of the Lady Sherlock series. How you doing?
Hi, how are you? I'm glad to be back.
Welcome back. We're very excited to have you. We have your friend Deanna Rayborn on a regular basis. So, yep.
Deanna and I just talked on a podcast like a week ago because the podcast host who was interviewing her is local to me. So when she came to my book signing, she said, "Will you call in as a surprise to Deanna Rayburn?" And I was like, "Sure." And we had fun.
Yeah, it's very funny to me because like whenever I look up your Lady Sherlock books, the Veronica Speedwell books like also pop up as you might also like this. And I'm like, I like both of these authors and they're both lovely to chat with. So why don't you tell us about the latest in the Lady Sherlock series?
The latest book in the Lady Sherlock series is basically Death on the Nile. It's like Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile, except on the high seas. So it's a murder that takes place on the ship. So you know it cannot be any outsiders because they are in the middle of the sea off the coast of France. They're traveling. The boat is traveling on its way to Egypt and India and all that. So it happened in the middle of a stormy night also. So during the night, it was like the boat was all shaking and, everybody was like, oh, we're going to have to evacuate. And then that calmed down. But in the morning, they woke up, finding one of the passengers is dead. And the lady detective of my series, Charlotte Holmes, Lady Sherlock, is actually in disguise on this ship. She's in disguise to do another job. So normally, somehow, she would get involved, but she's in disguise. So and she cannot have her disguise blown. So she cannot. Cannot like involve herself too much in the case. But there is a Scotland Yard detective on the boat also. So he is the one who takes over. So she is trying to solve this case, on her own. And she is also trying to stay low. And Lord Ingram is basically our eyes and ears on how the detective is conducting the case because he is there taking notes, helping out because so few people on the ship and everybody has to pitch in to help. And so that's how it goes. It's Death on the Nile, except on the high seas.
Yeah, so what I love is first of all so the last Charlotte like faked her own death, right?
That's right. That's one of the reasons she cannot be seen.
Right, because that would just make it, like ridiculously blow her cover. And she's, trying to evade Moriarty and, tell like basically make the world think that quote unquote Sherlock Holmes is dead.
No, the world thinks Sherlock Holmes is like on a long sabbatical from his work. They think his health has taken a turn for work. He's on a long sabbatical. But she wanted Moriarty to think that Sherlock Holmes is dead, or at least she wanted Moriarty's men to think that she's dead, so they're not looking for her.
Right. And so yeah, so and forgive me if you see my cat's tail in the background, by the way.
That's fine.
I'm recording this from home, and my cat has decided to crash this. But yeah, so she has faked her own death. So obviously appearing on this ship would make it very inconvenient and blow her cover, and she just wants to have this nice trip. And murder ensues
while doing something undercover for the crown. Yes. And then murder happens. Yes.
So I guess like one of my questions is, how do you, when you write these, do you know what direction each book is going to go in before, or do you sit down before writing and you're just like, okay, what are we going to do today? How are we going to keep this fresh? Because this is 7 books in, and the concept of having like a Lady Sherlock is awesome. But it's like every volume is fresh, and it feels it's like you don't necessarily need the knowledge of Sherlock Holmes to read them.
No,
And
you
it's
don't.
you
Yeah.
don't, and it's its own thing. But it feels fresh. So how does that how do you do that? What's your process?
Well, I don't know that I ever think to myself, oh, how do I keep this fresh? But it's more like with each book, I'm always like have no idea what to do. So there's like no grand design from. I mean, there is a grand design in my head. I've like, oh, I would like this to be this many books for a story arc. But for each particular book, I have no idea what to do. So with this book, the only thing I thought of was like, well, it'd be fun if it's like, they've been land-based for a while and they've traveled to different places. Like, it would be fun if they're like actually on a ship, and something happens on the ship. But like when I started the book, I was like, I have no idea what are they gonna do on the ship? Like, why are they there? Why is anybody on this ship? And who gets killed? And why does this matter? Like, and how does this matter to the overall overall arc of the story? So it's like one of those things that I start and I have zero idea. So I was like, well, at least let me research something about a ship, and turns out it's really really hard to get information from ships in that era also. And I keep forgetting this until somebody actually asked me a concrete question about the ships, and I had to go back and look at. I keep forgetting, but ships in this era are like, they're like the platypus, or they are like, those early dinosaurs that still have feathers. No, those early birds, those like dinosaurs that have like evolved, like start having feathers, but they're still dinosaurs. So the ships of the 1880s, they have both the smoke funnel. You see a picture of the Titanic, you immediately notice that it's got those funnels, right? The smoke is coming out. That's like the iconic silhouette of the ocean liners. But they have the funnels. They also have sails, because they haven't come to completely trust the steam, the boiler systems and everything. So they have the spare sails. So you also have these really tall masts in addition to having funnels. So it's like ships of that era are very interesting, and there are very few surviving like plans of what they look like on the inside. So it's like, yeah, just getting the ship right took me a long time.
How did you find information then if there wasn't a lot of it? Because that's actually something that I would have never thought of. I guess I'm being a librarian, one always hopes that there is extensive information about everything for research, but being a librarian, I should know there isn't.
Yes, because you know how these things kind of come in clumps. They're not evenly distributed information somehow. You tend to have a lot of information about some stuff, and then suddenly, like the next 10 years, there's nothing about it. So it's very easy to find plans for to find like interior like the deck plans for ships from the 1860s, and it's very very easy to find plans for ships from the 1890s, because that's when the first true luxury ships came online, the ones with like the pianos, the chandeliers and everything. Ships in the 1880s were like, you can find some exterior pictures, and I hunted down one deck plan, one surviving deck plan. I think it's like on these little brochures they give to actual passengers so they can find their way around the ship. I found the actual deck plan, but it's on this auction site, and it was $500 to start. At that point, I said, you know what? If anybody's going to tell me I am wrong, they have to first spend $500 of their own, and that is fair. That is fair. And also, that's $500 for plan for one ship. And I was like, I'm sure there will be plans of their, different ships look different on the inside. So after that point, I just, I actually designed my own ship, taking what I know about ship from earlier era and ship from a few years later. and came up with my own interior design for the ship.
That's really cool, actually. I love hearing about people's research plans. Another thing I really just love is just the voice of the characters, like the voice that you write in. Whenever Charlotte is eating snacks, I get very hungry. And the sweets.
In this particular instance, because she's in disguise, and she's in disguise as an actual person who also exists on this in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, not the actual historical figure, but just a real person.
A person within the world of the book. Yeah.
And the person is famously has a dainty appetite. So she cannot like be scarfing down in front of everybody else in the dining saloon or things like that. So she is kind of depending on Lord Ingram to basically get her office food. So like they are investigating this murder in the ship's library, and so the ship, to keep the investigators, well fed, they have all kinds of goodies laid out. So, and in between, like at lunchtime, Lord Ingram will steal some of these goodies, bring it out, and so Charlotte can scarf it down in his room.
And I mean, that's why she keeps him around, right?
For various reasons, and that is one of them.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I said, for various reasons, she keeps him around, and that is one of them. That he likes to feed her, and she likes to be fed.
So I do love their relationship, and it's developed really nicely. Can you talk a little bit about just sort of how you like? Did you feel like it's developed organically? I mean, I love the fact that like you go into every book and you're just like, what's going to happen today? Like does the progression of their relationship feel very natural? Because it doesn't read like you're checking boxes. Like, okay, they've known each other for this long, so now this, and now it's time for them to, talk about this. It feels very natural. Do you feel like their relationship sort of writes itself?
I think I've had very few books or stories or romances or plots that wrote themselves, but I feel overall it has not been too difficult to it has not wanted to pull my hair out in any way to write a relationship. I think it's been a lovely progression in the sense they've been friends for a long time and they know each other very well in a way. And sometimes they know each other better than they know themselves, because people tend to lie to themselves a little bit about what's important and what's how much something really matters. But it's nice to see them get closer in a way that does not interfere with them being who they are. Like they have not had to, like Charlotte at least, have not had to give up anything about who she is and what makes her who she is to be with Lord Ingram. And Lord Ingram, for his part, I think he has, via his relationship with her, he has learned a lot about himself, about about some of the mistaken beliefs he had about himself and what was important to him. So that's also nice to see. And when I was starting, I don't think I thought that far. It's just as you write these characters, get to know them better, and you go, oh, this is what you actually think, and this is what you actually need. Even though you think you want this, no, you actually what you need is that.
Yeah, it's pretty delightful, and it comes across really naturally when you read it.
It also comes from not knowing what's going to happen in each.
So I do have to ask, because I know you write many different genres.
I do.
You do? Like for the listeners at home who cannot see this, there is a poster in the background of you, and it looks like you have like a halo of fire.
That's true. It's I have written 4 young adult books, and this is the first book in a young adult fantasy trilogy. So so that is, I really like this cover, and I did a library visit one time, and for their visitors, they give you these humongous posters. And I happen to have driven up there, so I could just, they say, you can take the poster. And I was like, I would love to have it. So it's been my background ever since. I guess since the Zoom era started, that's been my background ever since. Before that, nobody has ever seen this.
Oh, the burning sky. Yeah, no, it's
Yes.
really very cool looking. So I guess my question is like, so you mentioned the research you did into the ship, and I mean you capture sort of the era and the voice of Lady Sherlock so well. Is it really difficult for you to switch between genres? Like, how do you write in different rooms? Do you have to listen to different music when you're writing a different story? Do you like, how do you get into, okay, to like, I'm writing Lady Sherlock. Do you have a soundtrack, or do you have like suites set aside to get into character?
Um, I it the weird thing about I actually haven't, when I write, I just sit down wherever I sit. I don't need a different ritual for different stories, and I find it very difficult to score. Like people make playlists for their stories, right? I know writers make playlists for different stories. I find it very hard to score like Lady Sherlock because I only know how to score either adventure stories like this, we go with like production, like trailer music, or I can score my romances because I also write historical romances, and I tend to write very emotional. So I like would get like a teary, emotional songs, and that would go with for Lady Sherlock because they're not like they're more like kind of like I don't know how to score mysteries. That's just it because they're not these books are like they're fun, but they also have serious parts. They're emotional, but they're also funny in parts. So I don't know how to score that.
I know, I totally, yeah, no, that makes sense. And the idea of authors making playlists is something that I didn't know about until a few years ago, actually. But that makes a good point. So is what do you do anything specific then to get into that voice? Or it's
I what happens with my writing is that in the first draft, either the first couple drafts, it will be all about trying to get the frame of the story right. Like, okay, what happens when, and is this the right direction for the whole story to go? So the character bits actually come later, like on the third and fourth iteration, when I have to dig down into the scene to like, okay, what are these stories? What are these characters really feeling? And actually, it's not that easy to get Lady Sherlock Charlotte's voice right, which is why a lot of times I actually prefer to write from other characters' point of view because they are more. A lot of other characters in the story are more emotional, like they feel their fear and their anxiety and their joys and just everything. They feel everything more strongly, and you want a more strong feeling central character as opposed to Lady Sherlock, who does not feel as strongly because she's just much more even keeled. But then that makes it interesting when it is from her point of view to go like, okay, how do I get across somebody who is very, very even keeled, but who also feels things, and like to make readers feel along with that.
So I'm not going to ask you what's next for Lady Sherlock because you probably don't know, but I'm sure it's going to be
I
super.
only know a little bit. I'm in the middle of book
do.
8, and well, I would love to be in the middle of book 8. I'm still in the first quarter of book 8 and still trying to figure out, like yesterday I did a lot of work on the book and I was like, wow, I know so much more about this book, but I still don't know what I should write for the next scene.
It sounds like an adventure.
Is what?
Sounds like an adventure.
Oh yeah, every book is adventure. I I don't agree with people when they say books are like children. I'm like, books are so much easier than children because you don't have to, well, most people don't have to spend 18 years on a book and a lot of emotional and physical and monetary outlay. And I books get criticized all the time and I'm like okay with it. But books are like children in the sense that every book is so different, just like every child is so different. You really sometimes cannot apply what you've learned from raising one child to another child because that child is a completely different individual that requires a different approach. So each book is also different. they will always, every book will come to bite you on the ass in some way, but they come at different times and they bite you in different ways. You cannot see where the trouble is coming exactly with each book.
It's always delightful to chat with you. Thank you so much.
It's nice to be here again. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Always. And so once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Sherry Thomas, author of the Lady Sherlock books, whose book 7 in the series, A Tempest at Sea, just came out and is now available at libraries and bookstores everywhere.
Oh, that was such a good blurb. I love it. That's like that's perfect. You should be doing this. I was gonna say like Death on the Nile, but really more on the sea and yeah, Tempest at Sea. Come check it out. The series is a delight, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very, very much. You have a nice day.
You too. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.